These weird creature models might look like a casserole of nonsense, but they're actually all part of a world-building and storytelling project that I've been working on for a number of years. Tir Estron serves as the location for these creatures. It's a strange alien continent that is not of this world. We follow the Terra Foundation of Exploration and Science as they explore and chronicle this strange land. In this video I'll show you how I design, make and paint these models. And if you stick around to the end, there might be some lore. Hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome back. How have you been? How's your ma? So, for no particular reason at all, I just felt like making something that looked a bit like a tardigrade. And the common nickname for them is water bear, so I thought, it'd be fun, make it look like a bear. And I don't know, I must have been having some sort of waking fever dream, but I thought it'd be cool if it had a big split down its stomach and down its chest, and it would just sort of grab its prey and pull it into itself, rather than having a mouth. Or it would pin you down on the floor and then sort of squat down on you and suck you up. Then I just thought it'd be a horrible idea if it would like dump its guts all over you and start slurping you up that way. I wasn't sure how to design the head. It's a bit difficult designing something that doesn't have a mouth. So I ended up just sticking on these little snail eye stalks just as a play saver really, until I figured out what was going on. I ended up quite liking them. So I ran with it, and eventually this thing evolved into a snail. I've always had a bit of a thing for snails. But don't worry, it's always been consensual. Yes, I know what it looks like. I decided to have one more crack at the design. Thought I'd draw it from the side and add a lot more of those snail elements. It's changed quite a lot from the last sketch. And what's a snail without its shell? Well, I mean, it's a slug. But that's not what I meant. I meant, you think snail, you think shell. Or if you're French, you think dinner. And I warn you now, just so you're not disappointed later, I abandoned two parts of this design. Firstly, I get rid of this pink colour, and secondly, I get rid of the giant vagina. And trust me, it hurts me just as much as it hurts you. The program I'm using here is ZBrush, and luckily for me it comes with it's called a Z or Z Sphere Zoo, and it just comes with a bunch of posable armatures, and luckily enough one of them is a bear, so that saved me a lot of time. Design wise, I'm trying to make this thing look a bit flabby and muscly, so think powerlifter rather than bodybuilder. Lots of fat rolls but big muscles underneath. Can anyone remember American Chopper on Discovery Channel it's about 15-20 years ago now? But there was a dad in it, and he was fat but he had these massive arms, and I've sort of subconsciously based it on him really. I didn't look up any reference of him, but he was in the back of my head when I was making it. God, I'm getting old. Just working on his hands and feet at the moment. Everything I make seems to get a little bit cute at some point. I'm not really sure why, but it keeps happening. Although it's a snail, I thought it should have claws. Just for, flipping over rocks and digging through bushes and, digging for grubs or whatever it eats. Berries and the like. This is probably the most defining part of the sculpt now, the eye stalks. I thought I'd actually film myself sculpting on the tablet this time round, rather than just doing a screen recording. I think it makes it a bit more interesting to actually see what's going on, but I can't really film the whole sculpting process like this because I do the bulk of these sculpts in my breaks at work, or at about 3 in the morning after I've done all my dad duties and my eyes are bleeding, and I just want to roll over and die. But not all heroes wear capes. Now I know I said I was going to get rid of that for JJ, but I thought I'd sneak a little one in. If you're making a creature and you want it to look a little bit more unsettling, adding some genitals can be really effective. They use it loads in the Alien franchise. Those films are teeming with willies and hoo-has. So much so in the new one, Alien Romulus, there's a point where the xenomorph forms a cocoon to grow bigger in, which is a new bit of lore. But on the front of that cocoon is a giant hoo-ha. And then there's a point where the alien bursts out of that. And I think it gave my poor wife some childbirthing flashbacks. I glanced over and it looked like she was sucking on a lemon. But I think the thing that made us most uncomfortable about that film was the CGI Ian Holm. That looked f***ing awful. So anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, we're doing skin texture now. This is always the fun bit. Adding wrinkles and flaps and lumps and bumps always brings it to life a lot more. Snail skin is really weird. It's sort of made out of all these lumps and bumps and blisters that are all squished together. So I'm going to do my best to try and replicate that. To help me make this skin, I decided to make an alpha to speed up the process. And all an alpha is basically just a texture stamp. I'm going to be able to take this pattern that I'm making now and just drag and drop it all over my model, which can save you hours of work. And then I lost all the footage of me using said alphas, but you can see them on there. That's almost as good, right? And now we're finally on to the last part of the sculpt, the shell. This was probably the hardest thing to sculpt of the whole job. I'm just showing you the highlights here, but I spent a good few hours making this bit. I think a problem a lot of people have with digital sculpting is you can use the symmetry tool. So you only have to sculpt one half of the model and then the other half does it for you. But the problem is, I'm guilty of this myself, you end up relying on it too much. And then when you make something that's asymmetrical, it can be a little bit more difficult than it should be. And now we're on to the final pose. I don't like to go too dramatic with my poses. I like them to look quite candid. So the idea behind this one is he's heard a noise or something and he's just reared up on his hind legs to scope it out, see what's going down. I drilled some strategic holes in the feet and the shell. This is just so I can put some dowel in or a bit of metal bar or as a paintbrush, as you can see here. And that's just so I can pick them up when I'm painting them so I don't smudge the paint with my ham fist. Right, I can't paint. One of the reasons I started this channel was to force myself to learn how to paint. I've always shied away from it because my colour theory isn't very good and I'm a bit colourblind, which comes into play on this model a little bit later. So what I've done so far is lay down a weird fleshy pink and then I've lightened that up with a little bit of white and dry brushed that on top. I was looking at some reference photos of snails, so I've added a little bit of green here and there slightly. And also I've bust out the airbrush, which is rare for me because I don't enjoy it. But again, it's a good excuse for me to practice. Now to accentuate all these lumps and bumps, I went over it with a really thin wash, which looked really good until I fucking ruined it. But that's okay, I went into this one a lot more free-spirited. I wasn't going to let myself get bogged down with mistakes. I always knew I could strip the paint off again and give it another go. But I didn't, I used it as a chance to experiment, so I started laying on colours on top of each other. Here I'm just lightening up the belly again. But it was starting to look too grey and stony, so I gave it a wash with a brown. And then I lightened up the belly for a third time, but it was starting to look good at this point. I was getting happier. It was still looking very dark, so I've gone over it with a much lighter green to pick out those lumps and bumps. I've gone over all the high points and over any bits I just want to stand out. Excuse me a second. That is fucking adorable. And then after the eyes were done, we moved on to a manicure and a pedicure. Onto the shell. I took the shell off my racing snail to make it faster, but it just made it more sluggish. I bust out the airbrush for this again. At this point I was getting a little bit more comfortable with it, but it's still very all or nothing, but I was quite happy with what I achieved here. I used a beige colour to start with and then airbrushed about 3 different browns on top of that. And then I did learn my lesson and give the whole thing a nice dark wash. It does tie everything together nicely, but it lost a little bit of its vibrancy. Once they were both dry, I mixed up a bit of epoxy to stick them together. Like a glove. I could make these bases digitally, I suppose, but it gets a bit boring after a while. Plus I like to get my hands dirty. I got these bits of bark from a Peter Rabbit themed kids park that I took my spawn to. They're the stuff that they put around kids slides and swings and all that sort of thing. You can pick them up in most kids parks. Probably a good idea to bring a kid with you. You're one, obviously. Or you could go at night. Would that look worse? Now it's time to slap on the old texture paste. You can use anything to make this stuff really. Plaster, grout, as long as you slap in a little bit of PVA, and some lumpy stuff like sand and stones. If it's not going how you like, don't be afraid to get your digits involved. There's probably a life lesson in there somewhere. After that had gone solid, I splashed on a little bit of watered down PVA. This stuff is forest ground cover that I got from WW Scenics. Really, it's just a jar of dirt. You could probably go outside and get your own dirt for free. I really like this stuff because all the ground particles are sort of the right size. It's got a little bit of twigs and stuff that look really good. And it just scales really well. Once it was down, I gave it a squirt with some alcohol to break the surface tension, and then I sealed it all in with a little bit of watered down PVA. Now I'm just adding some small stones and rocks because, well, this is outside and that's where stones and rocks come from. There was a little bit of dead space at the front of the base, so I'm just adding in this fallen tree. This is just an apple tree twig, but it looks really good as a dead tree. I'm just using a little bit of super glue and activator to glue it down. Apparently activator can make you sterile, but that doesn't bother me, I've already spawned. Off camera I gave this a zenithal highlight, and then I decided to paint it highlighter green for some reason. In my mind, this creature lived in a more foresty area rather than a jungle. Think Scotland or Wales or Norway. I know on Earth larger snails live in places like Africa where it's hot, but I didn't really want to do an environment like that. I wanted to do something more almost fantasy based, a bit like Lord of the Ringsy. But rather than there being trolls, they're f***ing huge snails. I had laid these stones on top of each other to almost look like a staircase. I wanted to give the impression that if you were standing at the top of this point, you could walk down, almost like this is the top of a valley. But of course I can't show a whole valley in this tiny area. So I'm just trying to trick your subconscious, really. I think it works, but I would. At this point it's time to add a little bit of shrubbery. So I slap on a little bit more of thinned down PVA glue. And then I sprinkle on some static grass. I don't have a static grass applicator to make it all stand up. But what I did find is if you give it a blast with some air, it stands up on its own. Once that had gone off, I added some of this green mossy flocking. The bag I got it in is unlabelled. So if any of the 3 people watching this know what it's called and you want to leave me a comment to let me know, I'll be very grateful, because I'm running out. I added a little bit of a very yellow green here and there. Added lots of little different shades, makes it look a lot more alive, I think. Again, I'm not sure what this stuff is called. They were having a gaming day in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes, so I just went in and bought a load of stuff. If you're a millennial American, a shopping centre is like a mall. And if you're a Gen Z American, it's like an ancient tomb full of peril. Again, I don't know what this is called. I got them from that tomb I just mentioned. But they're the wrong colour, I need them to be red. I want them to look like big, fat, snail-enticing, juicy berries. Here we are, the whole reason why the bear snail's here. He loves a berry, just ask anyone. You'd be like, hey Steve, I'm gonna get bear snail something for his birthday. You know him better than me. What do you think he'd like? Well, I know he's big into his golf. Maybe you could get him some clubs? Steve, I'm not made of money. I'm not going to get him clubs. Well, I don't know, mate. I don't know how much money you earn. Well, that's because you never fucking bothered to ask me anything about my life, Steve. We'd been friends for 5 fucking years. I thought this was a nice little touch. I just ripped off some of these berries and sprinkled them around the place like they'd fallen off the vine. Quite happy there. Small pleasures. Yellow. This little laser cut plant is from Gamer Grass, I think. I think they look really good. They're worth checking out if you get a chance. Just mixing up some 5000 year epoxy. This base is just a piece of MDF. I used to buy them in from Etsy, but now I just cut them out myself. I'm afraid I don't have any footage of that because I do it at work. Here we are, black 4.0. Apparently absorbs 99% of light. More like it absorbed 99% of the budget for this project. And all that's left to do is to glue the snail down. You might notice he's a little bit glossier than he was before. I gave him a glossy coat off camera that I was saving for the reveal. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for sticking around. We've just got a quick message from the TFES, and then it's on to the glamour shots. If you want to leave a like or a comment or anything, that would be cool. If you don't want to, that would be cool too. Okay, bye!
Cochleophare, or bear snail, is a large four-limbed gastropod-like creature. They reach an imposing 1.3 meters when standing on their hind legs, unless they are stretching. They are herbivorous and sustain themselves on a diet of plant matter. All plants seem to be suitable for consumption, but bear snails do show a preference for fruit, berries and nuts, but in times of scarcity bear snails have been known to eat bark and wood. The need to feed is strongest for a bear snail that is preparing for hibernation. If a bear snail does not have enough fat reserves, it may not survive the colder seasons of Tir Estron. The ability to gorge on a bonanza of food and convert it to fat is a life-saving ability. Bear snails have incredibly powerful bodies. But surprisingly, they have no bones. Their bodies consist of strong but malleable muscles, and bladders that pump high-pressure fluids into their limbs to make them rigid. This allows them to stretch their bodies to reach food or maneuver around obstacles. The only solid parts of a bear snail's body are the claws, shell and teeth. The claws are used for digging up roots and tubers, while the shell is used as a mobile home. These shells are so well insulated that bear snails can hibernate out in the open, although they do tend to hibernate off the ground in trees or under rocky outcrops. We assume this is to avoid predators, but no predators have been discovered. Only the remnants of smashed snail shells and claw marks. Bear snails are surprisingly good climbers. They mostly climb with their limbs, taking advantage of their long claws. But if faced with a sheer surface, they have a novel way of scaling it. By pressing their bodies against a flat surface, they can form a foot on their bellies like a terrestrial earth snail. The combination of undulating movement and the mucus produced by their skin allows the bear snail to effortlessly inch over surfaces that would be impossible for most animals. Bear snails can be found in damp forested areas that are rich in vegetation. A high humidity environment is essential to keep the snail's skin moist. If confronted by a bear snail, remember: make no sudden motion. Keep quiet. Drop to the ground. Play dead. Brought to you by the Terror Foundation of Exploration and Science.